My Schizophrenic Life, The True Story of Tracy Poe, Part 11, Work Part 3, Chapter 47, Hallucinations. My schizophrenia was progressively getting worse. I started to hear voices every day at work. It was smoky and loud in the welding shop with 70 welders working. I wore a respirator and earplugs, and the earplugs made the voices worse, but I ignored them, and they never affected my productivity. I was still a productive member of special projects. I was an excellent fitter and a good enough welder. I made carts, conveyors, railings, weld screens, parts bins, and other stuff related to manufacturing engineering. It got to where the engineers would have a plan that they made of the shop layout, and on the plan would be a box with an X on it, and they would tell me they needed a certain thing there, and I would design and build it. For instance, they did this exact thing when they needed a dust collector box that they could empty from the bottom that went on the bead blasting machine that made a lot of dust. I designed it, built it, and installed it all on my own. They had a lifting table on a conveyor that would lift, so a mass part could be pushed off the conveyor by hand. This table had side-shifting rollers that popped up so that tall mass parts could be maneuvered sideways to get them on a robot welding machine without using the overhead crane, which was slow. The problem was, the tallest mast would fall off the side-shifting rollers because the mast part was too long. The Japanese engineer asked me if I had any ideas, and I told him I would fix it. I put in railroad tracks by the lifting table, then put train wheels on the legs of the lifting table. They had these parts left over from a track they had tried to use near the laser cutter to move plates. This did not work because the train cars they made would not go around a curve, so I did not have to order any parts as they were all just sitting around. I had put the lifting table on the wheels that were on the track to move it sideways, then hooked a pneumatic piston to the lifting table with a control lever where the worker could reach it. That way, the worker could flip the lever, and the whole lifting table would shift sideways on the railroad tracks, allowing the long mass pieces to still balance on it and not fall off when they went to put it on the positioners of the robot welding machine. I built everything and installed it by myself without ever having to halt production. I was good at my job despite the voices in my head. I started working at Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America in January of 1995. 2 months into 1996, I began to live alone, and it was when I was alone that I had the worst symptoms compounded by the fact I self-medicated with 12 beers or more every night. Every night I went to sleep hearing the weather radio mumbling that I could not understand. Around the middle of 1996, I had driven down a road next to the factory and seen a synagogue. I recognized the letters were Hebrew letters on the side of the synagogue from some World War II books I had collected that had chapters about the Holocaust that had Polish ghetto notices in Yiddish in them. In my deluded, drunken state, I began to think the weather radio voices were in Yiddish. I bought books about Yiddish from Barnes and Noble and started studying it. I made flashcards first on the Hebrew alphabet with the Yiddish letters on one side of the card and the sound written in English letters on the other side of it. The Yiddish alphabet is a little bit different than the Hebrew alphabet, but basically the same. In Yiddish, you write the vowel sounds as letters, and in Hebrew, the vowel sounds are written as dots and dashes above or below the Hebrew letters. When you normally write in Hebrew, you do not include these dots and dashes. Yiddish is a lot easier than Hebrew because of this. There is a distinct letter or letter combination for each vowel sound. Yiddish is based on German, and I had taken German in high school. I started with flashcards of the Yiddish alphabet, but soon made flashcards with Yiddish words on them, with the Yiddish word on one side, and the transliteration and meaning written with the English alphabet on the other. As I started learning Yiddish, I learned to read and write in Yiddish. I began to think I was understanding the weather radio voices, but I probably was just hearing Yiddish words I learned in the voices I heard. I began to collect Yiddish music compact discs and play them on my stereo. I began to hear voices in Yiddish, I thought. Then around 1997 I would get drunk, and as I was passing out to go to sleep, I would see lines of Holocaust victims walking through my room. Sometimes they were starving people, and sometimes they were skeletons. But they were all dressed in rags and appeared in tones of gray like they were in black and white. However, I never saw them in white, just in tones of gray. It started to get worse, and I would see them walking through my apartment while I was wide awake, but after I had been drinking. This went on every night for about a year. Then around December I started seeing a little girl in line with the Holocaust people and skeletons in gray. The little girl was wearing a simple white dress, so she stood out from the rest of the people and skeletons in gray rags. I know it was December because I began to see the little girl without the Holocaust people and skeletons. I had walked around outside one night with her, and we had looked at Christmas lights. It was around Christmas of 1997 that she became a fixture in my deluded life. She had many names over the years that I saw her, but I first called her Alexandra. She began to be around me every night, even when I was drunk, while there were no Holocaust people or skeletons around at the time. I got a computer in mid-1998 and got on America Online when I hooked it up. One of the first things I did was make a profile for myself with the screen name Tracy Poe, but I also made a profile for Alexandra, the hallucination, with the screen name Gridji. One of the first places I found online was the Yiddish Workman's Circle, and they had a link to a site that sold Yiddish books. I had gotten a credit card with a $500 limit when I first got my computer, so I could pay for America Online and purchase things. Before that, I had no credit history. I began to buy Yiddish books. I still have most of them today. One of the first programs I bought software for on my computer was CorelDRAW 8. It came with a photo paint program that was like Photoshop. I wanted to learn how to manipulate photos to make collages. I bought an early digital camera and a scanner for this endeavor. Chapter 48, CNC Programmer. In 1998, at Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America, they hired a new manager to oversee manufacturing engineering named Max. He hired an engineer who had graduated from Texas A&M named Keith, and Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America paid to move him to Houston. Keith set up a huge machine to machine axle assembly bodies, and this took about 2 months. I worked with him helping, and I designed and built the axle assembly bodies welding jigs for that area. Manufacturing engineering then purchased a new computer numerical control milling machine from a company called Amazak that Keith was supposed to set up. They wanted to make a lot of the parts in-house that they were paying outside vendors for. Keith asked me if I wanted to work on it and learn programming. He liked me because I was white. Keith did not like foreigners, and Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America was full of Japanese engineers from Mitsubishi, and Vietnamese, Hispanic, and African workers from foreign countries. I told him I would work for him, as I wanted to learn to program a computer numeric control machine. I left special projects and worked with Keith setting up the Mazak milling machine. I engineered all the setups. The Mazak model mill, we had 2 tool holders that the automated milling head could pull tools from, one on the left and one on the right of a long milling table. There was a divider in the middle. While the mill was working on the right, the machine operator could load the left side with parts and vice versa. That way there was little downtime. I designed and built all the fixtures that held the part on this machine, which was Keith's job. I learned to program it and got familiar with the feed rates and drilling speeds the tools worked at. Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America worked in the metric system, but Keith, for some reason, probably because he was racist, set the Mazak up in inches because that is the standard in the United States. I had to convert all the measurements from the blueprints of the parts to make them correctly. There are 25.4 millimeters in an inch, and I had to use this conversion formula for everything. The Mazak was in a new building that housed huge cutting tables and 2 flame cutting machines that cut parts, some of which would be drilled on the Mazak mill. Special projects had moved into this new building also, and were next to the Mazak mill. There was an office for engineers in the far corner of this new building, and located in this office was the computer that all the programs for the Mazak were supposed to be stored on. The programming head on the Mazak could store programs also, but this was supposed to be temporary, and programs were supposed to be loaded from the computer onto the programming head. At my apartment, I had been alone with no friends and having schizophrenic hallucinations for a few years now. There was a couple that I passed when I was walking to my apartment who would occasionally talk to me. Eventually, we struck up a friendship in early 1999. Their names were Randall and Susan. Susan had 2 children. Her son was 16 and her daughter was 14. Randall and Susan would come over occasionally and get on my computer. I did not mind because being with other people lessened my schizophrenic symptoms. In my drunken state, I would occasionally slip up and talk about the little girl I saw as if she were real. She was real to me in my deluded state. Susan and Randall would tell each other in front of me in a whisper, "He is talking about little girls again." Chapter 49, Computer Problems. One day, Keith came to my apartment after work because he wanted to show me something on the computer. Keith was big into computer smut, And he said I just had to join this site that offered a pass that would get you into multiple sites. Keith asked for my credit card, and I gave it to him. I have always been a pushover and let people walk all over me. This is especially true when I'm drunk, and I was drunk that night. He took my credit card and signed me up for the all-access pass. He then put the links to the site in my favorites. I have never been very sexual. I can to this day count all my lovers on one hand and have fingers left over. I have only been with my 2 wives and 1 girlfriend. I really do not like to be touched by anyone. Plus, I did not like looking at these sites alone because I would see the little girl hallucination when I did and was too embarrassed. Randall came over the next night and saw the site on my favorites and started looking at it. He came over every day after that to look at these sites on my computer. He was a constant fixture at my apartment. He had a cable from his neighbor's house, so he could steal the cable channels for his television. And I heard Susan complain that all he wanted to do was watch the adult channel that they received on their stolen cable. He had come over every day for over a month. I got my credit card bill and noticed that the site was charging me every month, so I went on it and canceled it. A few weeks later, the all-access pass had expired, and the link no longer worked when Randall came over, so he went out and bought a computer of his own. About this time, I bought 2 cameras that worked as monitors, where I could watch a live feed from the cameras on my computer. I had no way to record these feeds, they were just monitors. One pointed at my front door in the other room, and one pointed out the window of the bedroom I used as an office. I had 2 twin beds, and I moved them around a lot. For a while, I had one of the beds in my closet and would sleep in there because I seemed to have less hallucinations of Holocaust people and skeletons in rags that way. The other bed I had put in the front room, so when you went in the door, you saw a bed. It was just outside the kitchen area. I usually sleep in this bed. There was a camera monitor in this room pointed at the door. I suffered from extreme paranoia and would watch these camera monitors thinking I would see intruders on them. My credit card started showing charges I had not made. I had to get a new card number to get it to stop. At Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America, they asked Keith if he wanted to be the machine shop manager, and he told them that he would need a substantial raise because that is not what they hired him for. They hired him to put in machines. They said they would not give him a raise, and he quit. I was now under the supervision of Trin, a Vietnamese guy who ran the laser cutting machine. He was made manager of the axle machining area, the 2 cutting tables, and the Mazak that I was on. Shortly after Keith left, the link to the computer in the engineering office broke, and you could not load computer programs to the Mazak anymore. All the programs were on the control head. The Mazak company was called, and they came out twice, but the man from Mazak never fixed the problem. I went to a meeting that the overall manager had with various employees every month. I told him the Mazak was set up in inches and not metric. The overall manager was mad at Max about this and wanted to know why the machine was set up in inches. So, on the control head, I converted the Mazak over to millimeters and spent 2 days converting all the programs to millimeters on the Mazak control head. I had done all the programming on the Mazak. Gordon, the superintendent, came to me and said that Trin planned on making me a machine operator, which was a position lower than a welder and not a machine programmer like I was. He told me that I should quit. About 2 weeks later, I came in the morning, and the night shift operator or someone else had erased all the programs off the control head. I began hearing voices from the stress. They were saying, "You are going to take the fall for this." I became paranoid. It was easy to erase the programs on the control head. There was a button that said page erase, and when I accidentally hit it once, it said, "Are you sure?" All you had to do was hit yes, and all the programs on the control head were gone. Trin did not keep the control head locked like was done on all the other machines. It would do no good to fix the computer link because all the programs on the computer were in inches, not millimeters. All the parts would have to be reprogrammed. I thought that Trin had made a mistake in making me a machine operator and not a machine programmer, because if I were a machine programmer, I would have stayed and fixed it. But I took Gordon, the superintendent's advice, and I walked out that morning and quit. Shaw in Special Projects had been the best boss I ever had working anywhere. Trin had not been a good boss, but he did not try to murder me. Nobody poisoned me at Mitsubishi Caterpillar Forklift America. Chapter 50. Quiet Flex. I wanted an office job as I was tired of the smoke, noise, and grime of shop work. I bought some dress clothes and bought compact disc classes on Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint and studied them. I made a resume with a Word template as I had gotten Microsoft Word on my computer a few months back. I then went to a temporary agency and did well enough on the test to land a temporary position at Quiet Flex, a company that made air conditioning ductwork. What landed me the job was that I had accounts payable on my resume from my time working for Butch at ABFZ Oil Tools when I learned how to approve bills and route them to the right account. I went in for an interview and got the job. They put me working for an old woman and I did the data entry on orders that came in. Every time I got an order, I would enter the name and address into an Excel spreadsheet so I could easily check the information the next time an order came through. The old lady had a Rolodex with this info on it. They had a price increase and had to send out new price sheets to all their customers. The boss asked the old lady where she had gotten the names of the customers, and she said, "From my Rolodex." The boss said that he was going to have another lady enter all the customer names and addresses into a single file on the computer. I told him I already had a list of all the customers who had ordered products from the last month and handed him a printout I had made of it. He wanted it in a different format, but all the customer names were there, and the lady tasked with making the list just copied my work into the format the boss wanted. The old lady was mad at me saying I made her look bad, and she started trying to get me replaced with the temporary agency. After 2 months there, and after I had successfully done everything asked of me, they let me go and replaced me with a woman as the old lady had suggested. She hated men because I was never anything but nice to her, and she used to compare me to the man that worked there previously that she also did not like. The temporary company called me at home and told me I had been replaced, and to come to the temporary office and get my stuff that was in my desk drawer, like my watch.